Join me today on YouTube at 3:45 p.m. Eastern, where we will stream both XFL games and air 6 continuous hours of coverage of these games. And now, on with our feature presentation. What's the most important part about signing any player, or any employee for that matter, no matter the company? Some might say making sure that the person fits in with the environment, knows his or her role with the team, and knows what their responsibilities are. Some might say that it's making sure that the person passes the appropriate background check, that their medicals are good, or that if there's any examination that they need to pass in order to exhibit some kind of proficiency, that they pass it with flying colors. You get the idea. There's probably a bunch of different things that you can think of that fit this criteria. However, there's one highly important element that just seems like common sense. If you're hiring someone, first and foremost, you want to make sure that the person in question knows that they've been hired. That's kind of important. If you hire someone to do a job, you expect them to be there to perform said job. And then, the day that they need to show up for work, they're not there because they have no idea that they've even been signed or hired. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. You know how to list the job, you just don't know how to offer the job. And that's really the most important part, the offering. Anyone can just list jobs. Well, the player you've been watching this whole time is none other than quarterback Mike Ford. We're going to talk about his NFL career in just a bit, but there's not too much notable about him when it comes to the pros. Heck, even if you're a diehard NFL fan, this might be the first time you've ever heard the name Mike Ford, and there's a good reason for that. However, while Ford didn't exactly do anything on the field that was remarkable, more than 40 years later, he lives on for being one of the craziest signings in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. Not necessarily from a why did they sign him perspective, but rather from a how the heck this all went down perspective. Just when you thought the 1982 season couldn't get any weirder and any more bizarre, Mike Ford comes to Cincinnati and proves everyone wrong. Because this is the story by what might just be, in the over half-century long history of the Cincinnati Bengals, the craziest and wackiest signing of all time. Before I talk about the actual signing in question and what was so crazy about it, we need some context to understand just who Mike Ford is, and why the Bengals even wanted to sign him in the first place. Ford was best known for playing 4 seasons under center as the quarterback for SMU, and unfortunately, his career was an extremely mixed bag, where it looked incredibly promising, and then just derailed. There was a point when Ford started off his career in 1977 that he was one of the best quarterbacks in the Southwest Conference, and even the nation, you could argue. In 1977, he led the Southwest Conference in completion percentage, and then followed that up in 1978 by doing the exact same thing. This made Ford the first quarterback in SMU history to ever lead the conference in that category twice. In 1977, he finished third in the Southwest Conference in passing touchdowns, and followed that up in 1978 by not only leading the conference by throwing 17, but finishing top 5 in the entire NCAA in that category. And in 1977, he finished first in the conference in passing yards, and not only followed that up in 1978 by leading the conference again in that category, but by leading the entire NCAA by throwing for over 3,000 yards. Ford became just the third quarterback in Southwest Conference history at the time to throw for over 3,000 yards in a season, alongside Chuck Hickson and Tommy Kramer, who had a pretty good career in the NFL all things considered. And with Ford under center, SMU's passing game looked unstoppable. Case in point, a 1978 game against Ohio State, where the Mustangs erased a 14-point deficit to tie it at 35 apiece, where Ford completed 36 passes for 341 yards, threw 1 passing touchdown, and ran for 3 more. The 35 points put up by SMU in that game, courtesy of Ford's great effort, made SMU the first team since Purdue all the way back on October 14, 1967, more than a decade ago, to put up at least 30 on the Buckeyes in a regular season game. Ford was that good. However, even though his first 2 years with the Mustangs were great, and he was even an early frontrunner to be a highly successful NFL quarterback and get drafted early when the time came, everything collapsed after the 1978 season. He suffered an injury that forced him to miss just about all of the 1979 season, and in 1980, following back-to-back losses against Baylor and Houston, where Ford played terribly and threw interceptions left, right, and center, he got benched and never reclaimed that starting spot. Head coach Ron Meyer called it the hardest thing he ever had to do, and even though it turned out to be the right move, as SMU went 4-1 after the benching and even upset a number 2 ranked Texas team on national TV, no one could have possibly predicted the collapse of Mike Ford and his free-falling stock. From one of the best quarterbacks in the nation to a bench warmer in 2 years. And while he did get drafted to play in the NFL, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided to take the guy in the 1981 NFL Draft, it was only in the 9th round with pick number 228, making him the 8th quarterback off the board. The good news was that he was in the NFL. The bad news was that as a 9th round pick, there are no expectations for you to even make a roster. Of the 27 picks in the round that year, 15 of them, or 56%, never played a snap. And while you have some success stories, like Washington defensive tackle Darryl Grant and Cardinals running back Stump Mitchell, you had a lot of people who amounted to nothing in the pros. When you're a 9th round pick, your job security is always up in the air. Ford played no snaps in 1981, and in 1982, when asked about his job security, he said, "I don't know. I can't say that I'm still not going to sleep very good until I hear from Coach McKay. I'm not 100% sure." Ford knew well that his days as a Buck were numbered, and after the strike ended, Ford was put on waivers by the Buccaneers, ending his brief, unremarkable stint in Tampa Bay where he played 0 regular season snaps. Hence, why all of these clips are clips of him from college. So was that it for Ford? Was that the end of his NFL career? Not quite. Because the Cincinnati Bengals badly needed some depth at the quarterback position, thanks to this man right here, Jack Thompson. It seemed on the surface like Cincinnati had a great thing going at quarterback. You had Ken Anderson, the reigning MVP and Offensive Player of the Year, who was well on pace for another Pro Bowl season as your number 1 guy. And you had Jack Thompson, a former first-round pick, who, while not good by any means, a lot of teams would kill to have as their starter, let alone their backup, as their number 2 guy. And if that statement sounds hyperbolic, in 1983, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers literally traded a first-round pick to the Bengals to acquire Thompson, which was such a laughably bad trade that epitomizes how dysfunctional the 80s Bucs were. But I digress. Plus, you had Turk Schoner as the number 3 guy, who's not a bad third-string option by any means. So if you had Anderson as the number 1 guy, and had Thompson as the number 2 guy, and Schoner as the number 3 guy, and you only carry 3 quarterbacks anyways, then why do you need a quarterback so badly when you might have the best starter in football and the best backup in football and an awfully good number 3 guy as well? Well, Thompson was ticked off by the strike and never wanted to play in the NFL again. When the 2-month strike finally ended and play resumed, Thompson was AWOL from the team, nowhere to be found, and offering his services to various USFL teams, including the Michigan Panthers and the Washington Federals. Thompson was trying to do everything to get out of his Bengals contract, and James Gold, the chief operating officer of the Federals and a native Cincinnati resident, said on Thompson after the strike, he will not report to the Bengals. That's what I was told today by the Michigan club. He even filed a lawsuit against the NFL and Cincinnati Bengals for breach of contract, saying that his 5-year contract was breached, and therefore he became a free agent because the Bengals didn't pay Thompson during the strike, even though they had to, because Thompson is not a member of the NFL Players Association. It was a complicated mess that is only going to make things more confusing if I try and dive through the whole thing in this video. So let's just sum it up like this. Thompson was angry, Thompson sued, and Thompson vowed to never play in Cincinnati again after how they treated him. He was not going to report to the team. End of discussion. The Bengals needed a new number 3 quarterback the rest of the way, or at least until Thompson changed his mind. And with that, they knew just who to call up. They called up none other than Mike Ford, who was just put on waivers by the Buccaneers. Now, I can assume that Forrest Gregg, the head coach of the Bengals, watched a ton of Ford's tape, seeing as Gregg went to SMU and played his college football there, so there was a natural connection there with his alma mater. Heck, Gregg would later become the coach there with the almost impossible role of trying to revive a program that just suffered the death penalty. However, regardless of the reasoning, Mike Ford was now a Cincinnati Bengal. They cleaned him off of waivers on Wednesday, and the plan was to have him practice on Thursday to get a crash course on the playbook and get to know the players and the coaching staff and whatnot. But when Thursday came, and it was time for practice, the Bengals only had 2 quarterbacks on the field. Ken Anderson was there, and Turk Schoner was there. But for some bizarre reason, there was no Mike Ford. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of signing Ford, right? You need a quarterback to be there because your other quarterback is not there. And now, he's not there either. Why did he not report? Well, as it turns out, at no point whatsoever did the Bengals ever reach out to Ford to let him know that he had been signed by the team. Seriously, they had one job: contact Ford and let him know that he was a Bengal. And they couldn't even do that. Now the Bengals were in a state of panic. They needed their third-string quarterback there, and he was nowhere to be found. So you would think that the next logical step would be to figure out where he lives, call that number, and let him know. And to be fair to the Bengals, that's exactly what they did, as they called up his house in Dallas to let him know, "Hey, we totally forgot to tell you this, our bad, but we just signed you. You're on our team now, so get your butt up to Cincinnati." The only problem? Ford wasn't there. In fact, not only was he not there, but he wasn't even close to there, as he was in the middle of a drive from Dallas to Tampa Bay, in all likelihood, to return to the Buccaneers, not knowing the news that he had been cut by the team. So let's just recap where we are right now in this saga. The Bengals picked up Mike Ford on Wednesday, but forgot to contact him. On Thursday, they realized their mistake and tried contacting his home to let him know the news. But his mother picked up instead and said that Ford was driving from Texas to Florida, which is a long, long drive, as in over 1,100 miles or 15 continuous hours with no traffic and no pit stops, so they had to wait until he arrived there to let him know to now find a way, whether by car or by plane or whatever, to get up to Cincinnati. And despite claiming him on Wednesday, it was only on Friday afternoon, 48 hours later, when a Bengals spokesman was able to find him, locate him, and let him know that he was now a Cincinnati Bengal. Somehow, what should have been a routine waiver pickup to get a temporary third-string quarterback while the Jack Thompson drama played out, turned into this giant saga where the team had no idea where he was and had no idea how to contact him, and where the player had no clue that he was on a brand new team, either because he still thought he was on the Bucs or because he thought that no one claimed him. If that's not crazy, then I don't know what is. However, once Ford finally got contacted, which felt like an eternity later, he reported to the team and backed up Anderson and Schoner for the time being. Ford was excited to be going to Cincinnati once he actually found out, albeit way later than expected, that he was going to Cincinnati, saying, "I'd like to win a Super Bowl. I'd like to experience what these guys did last year when they made it to Super Bowl 16 before losing to the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, it's a good situation to be with this club. They're good people, and they pretty well got their goals set out. They go about them in a business-like manner. I like that." Unfortunately, Ford's time in Cincy didn't last long. He was cleaned on December 1st, didn't find out about the news until December 3rd, and was waived 3 weeks later when the Bengals activated cornerback John Simmons after he healed from a preseason shoulder injury and needed to fill up a roster spot. And Ford never played a regular season snap in the NFL, so this is about the extent of his professional career. Still, sometimes, the craziest stories are from the forgotten names, and this is one of them. So as a word to the wise, the next time you hire someone, whether you're an NFL team, or a company, or anyone in a position to hire someone, make sure you let the person know that they've been hired. Because due to this chaos, even though Mike Ford never took an official snap in the NFL, he lives on today because he might hold the distinction of being the craziest waiver claim, considering the terrible procedure behind it, in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals franchise. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.